Can, a game steeped in nostalgia, entirely made up of black and white art, and the game itself consists of luck, dice rolls and random chance, have any chance of surviving in today's modern gaming marketplace? Well, I might be. This is Who Dares Rolls, and together we're about to find that out in Escape the Dark Sector from Themeborne Games. Themeborne first popped up on our radars a couple of years ago when they put out Escape the Dark Castle. Now what that was a nostalgic casting misty-eyed back to the days of our youth, misspent youth in fact, with dices and paperbacks and the good old choose-your-own-adventure books from Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone. And Escape the Dark Castle attempted to evoke that nostalgic pang that we all have for those bygone days in its game format. Not only did it take the black and white art, some of it lined and some of it shakily drawn, callbacks to all those classic books, but also the entire aesthetic of it is really kind of a callback to that 80s feel. Completely black and white, dice led, very luck driven. Essentially the original game took you turning cards over and then making a choice depending on what they were and attacking the monsters, and that was it, and pretty much rolling dice to kill them. I played the original Dark Castle back a year or two ago at Expo when it was properly released. I wasn't terribly gripped by it. I felt that I had no player agency. There was no real choice. It was very random, and I'm a man who loves a dice. But yes, punishing, random, and I didn't feel like I had enough sort of control over anything really. It was just more of a luck of turn a card, roll a dice, and hope you survived. Usually you didn't. So I kind of left to park Dark Castle there. I know it's got a huge amount of buzz. A lot of people are screaming about it. A lot of people really enjoyed it. Some other people didn't so much. But there you go. It's a Marmite game. And in some ways, hey, that's set our stall and that's be what we are, which is what Themeborne have done. So all of that aside, let's have a look at Escape the Dark Sector, which is maybe the second difficult album for Themeborne and their follow-up to Escape the Dark Castle. So Sector doesn't change the general aesthetics. We're still sticking with the black and white art, that callback to the 80s nostalgia, that fighting fantasy, choose-your-own-adventure vibe. It worked very well with Dark Castle. There is definitely a huge market for it. There's people gnashing at the bit for that, and I know Dark Castle had a huge following of people who really enjoyed it. So hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And aesthetically, it hasn't changed very much. However, gameplay-wise, there is now some tweaks and some additions and a little bit more rules overhead that I believe takes what Escape the Dark Castle was and kind of transforms it into, dare I say, a proper game. So to start off your adventure, you're going to pick a character. Of course we are. You're going to pick one of any of the 6 starting characters. They all come with their own player card, a nice tarot sort of size card. Each of these characters will have differing stats in the 3 main skills that you use during the game. And they are might, wisdom and cunning, and they each come with their own custom die, which will obviously be factored to ratio to those skills depending on what they are good at. In addition to that, you're also going to attach a cybernetic, so there's one your character will get. They will usually give you an additional dice roll or some other tweak to one of those abilities when you're in the game. Some of them are during game, one time a turn, or whenever you do a certain thing, but they are kind of like a small perk you get there. Along with that, you're going to get the player sheet, which is kind of cool. It essentially kind of shows like it's your life sheet, which you're going to pencil in and fill in your character's name. But a nice touch, it kind of works a bit like a sort of a bio readout. So as you're taking hits and all that, you kind of fill that in. It's kind of a nice touch. Thematically, I think Dark Castle just came with blank sheets, so already it's kind of a nice sort of thematic sort of touch in the game. In addition to that, you're eventually going to step with a starting item or weapon. There's shooting in this. Like Dark Castle, the idea is you're going to be making your way through this deck of adventure cards, these chapter cards. But Dark Sector does a nice touch in that it has 3 chapters in there, 3 increasingly harder sets of cards. And what you're going to do is shuffle those, select 4 of each of these, and build a set. So start with a 3, 2 and 1, so it's increasing in difficulty level as you go deeper into the adventure, with a boss card, one of the random boss cards slipped in at the back, just to entice you as to what's going to happen at the very end of the adventure. And then pretty much you're off. And the idea is you'll turn over one of these cards. There will be some art on there, and some text relating to it. Now, some of these will be choose. Are you going to do this? Are you going to do that? Some of them will require you a dice roll. Or some of them will be combat encounters with monsters. And as we're discussing combat encounters with monsters, well, let's go through how this differs or how this works in this version. So, in a combat situation, you have 2 options. You can use your weapons, your ranged weapons for starters, which is usually a good start. So you're going to turn over, the creature will be statted out with some dice there on the card. It will fill in at the bottom. I'm using a rather nice playmat that was supplied with my review copy of the game. It's very cool if you haven't got one. I strongly suggest you like one of those. It's pretty nice. Not a big mat fan, but it works very well with this. So anyway, the monster's dice will be put out. There's essentially their health. Now, some of them have the icon which looks like a little player head there. That means that you roll 2 dice for every additional character. So that's rolled. Obviously, it factors into the health level depending on how many of you are playing. And then you're off, really. So combat, as I say, works 2 ways. Number 1, you can use ranged combat, which is probably a sensible move if you've got weapons. Each weapon comes with dice specific to them, so some of them ballistic weapons, some of them energy weapons, there's even a rocket launcher. So you have a deliberate dice, a specific dice for those weapons. Some of them are loaded with 1 bullet, some of them are loaded with 3 bullets, 2 or whatever. You will roll that many dice and then look at what that relates to on both the weapon itself and the monster card. So you've got bullets, for instance, or the really shiny fiery bullets, which is like a crit hit, or occasionally you get jams, which in the event of a jam will mean you will lose all the shots that you fired, even if the rest of them are hits. And then if some of the monsters have specific effects, that certain weapons may have a better effect on the creature than others, so you can always check on the card as to what's going to be more effective at that creature for hitting it. Every hit will remove 1 of those dice from its health, and we rinse repeat. Now there's a couple of other little options you've got here. Number 1, you could go straight into hand-to-hand combat if you so wish, and on the monster's cards again it shows what its hits are, if it's got ranged or if it's just close combat fight. However, once you've made the choice to go into close combat fighting, then you can't then step back into ranged. Few other things you can do. There's a couple of other actions. There's obviously you can go to the medical bot as an action, put your player dice on there, and as your action you will heal yourself 1 point. There's also really cool is the flank option, which you can, instead of making an attack that round, go to the flank action. And what it will essentially do, give you a more powerful attack in the end of that round before you move into the next combat round. It's a nice tactical move. Whenever you're doing any of these actions, at least someone has to be fighting the creature. Otherwise, you can't do that. And that's kind of it. Now, already there's a nice amount of choices there. You've got some mitigation for the dice. You've got different tactical options. You can reload. You can do other little bits and pieces there. But it's a nice options that there's a bit more player agency. Whereas in Dark Castle, always felt that you were pretty much just, oh, there's a thing there, roll some dice, oh shit, I'm dead. So that already, I like that there is lots of options, lots of choices. There's some tactics there. You feel like you've got a bit more control over what is happening, which is lovely. Aside from that, pretty much all you're doing is playing the cards, making your way through to the chapters, desperately trying to survive to get to the end boss, kill the end boss, and win the game. And that's pretty much it. So there we have it. There's a rough overview of Dark Sector, how it works, how it plays. So, what do we think? What do I think about Dark Sector? As I've said before, preceded the review of this, that Escape the Dark Castle, the predecessor to this, I kind of found was more of a miss than a hit for me. Very random. I didn't get on with it, so I never bought it, never played it, never did any of that stuff. Dark Sector does enough that with the added mechanisms, the options you have during the fights, so the flank options, the med bots, and the ranged attacks and the hand-to-hand attacks, all those little mechanical kind of tweaks, just gives you enough player control over what you're doing to give you more of a chance. It's still a very punishing game. If you've played, I mean, it is a callback to stuff like Chainsaw Warrior, which is Games Workshop's kind of this version of this, actually, from some time ago. I love, as a John Carpenter movie, as a board game, essentially, is Chainsaw Warrior. Obviously lost long to time. Can be found as an app, though. I've gone off a track. So, but yes, as that punishing experience, it does a very good job of that, and gives you enough, as I say, player options to be able to tweak it up, to be able to maybe stand half a chance, depending on what you're coming up against as you go through. So all that's kind of cool. All that's good. Aesthetically wise, components, the actual dice and all of that stuff and everything is very solid. I really like the dice, a nice big, fat, chunky dice for the characters. Everything's got a weighty feel to it. It feels nice. There's nice things to roll, and I love a dice roll. And these are the sort of dice I like, and they it's cool. The game mat, which came with the review copy, which is purchasable separately, again has a really nice aesthetic touch, just organising the play area, and it looks kind of cool. It's very, like the rest of the game, is very sparse in its art and design as such. It's kind of very minimalistic, but down to the thing. But it works very well with that, so it's definitely not one for game mats, but actually with this, I can see the attraction in it. The rest of the game components, cards, are a fairly decent quality. The big tarot-sized cards I had in mind had kind of folded a bit, which I think is just to do with the size of the card and maybe the thickness of the cardboard. Certainly nothing to dissuade you from playing or whatever, and a book on them I'm sure would flatten them out. Then we come down to the art and design, really. I mean, the aesthetics wise of the actual black and white and how all that kind of functions around the cards and detail all looks fine. Nothing is confusing, works very well. The art, I think you're going to come down is very much a Marmite area. I prefer these to some of the Dark Castle. Actually, I'm on the fence. See, Dark Castle was what first attracted me, was the art and design on it. It did kind of feel a little bit like those Fighting Fantasy, those books, early sort of stuff. And this has got more of the same. If you look at those Fighting Fantasy books, a lot of them had some great artists in them. There was some really fantastic art, not all of it, but some of it was brilliant. Ian McCraig's art in Death Trap Dungeon and City of Thieves. I mean, the guy went on to work for Lucasfilm as a illustrator, so it tells you what that's some beautiful art. Sector 8, Escape the Dark Sector, hasn't got that. The art is rudimentary. It's okay, it's rough, but some of it isn't great. But that's it. You're either going to love or hate that aesthetic, I guess. I don't mind it. The rest of the game, I mean, gameplay-wise is fine. It plays very well, plays great. It's very enjoyable. It plays very well as a solo player experience, rather like Chainsaw Warrior. With more players, it is fun. You kind of get a bit of that quarterback and going off to a certain extent with it. It works all right. It extends the experience a bit. But it's still brutal. It's a fun, brutal, cooperative fish feel to it to get through those things. I may sway on the side that actually possibly works better as a single player experience, because you can just kind of set it up quickly and kind of like that Chainsaw Warrior vibes, and you just sit and kind of do your thing and go through that experience faster and kind of crack on with it. And that works very well. But either or, all player counts, it works pretty solidly. The more players gives you a bit more chance of maybe getting through it, but then there's those modifiers regarding to the monsters what attack you, how much health they get. But yeah, that's cool. Longevity of it, there's a fair bit of game in here in the box. Yes, I think when you reach about half dozen to a dozen plays of this thing, you are going to be just seeing the same cards again. There's no surprises. The first 3 or 4 to 5 games are the best games, especially if you don't read all the cards, and just getting that surprise experience of, what's next? Certainly, as you get past that 5 or 6 games, the novelty factor falls off, because you're then suddenly like, it's this card, it's that card. There's quite a bit of variety in there before you reach that, but I reckon the sweet spot is about 8 games in, and you're going to then be really hitting the same old cards again. But yes, all things being considered, Escape the Dark Sector is a massive improvement in my opinion over Dark Castle. Has just enough sort of play agency and mechanics in there to allow you to tweak and refine your play through the game and give you more of a chance to feel like you're up against it rather than just it being random. It is still random. There's still a lot of dice rolls. There's still random plays of the cards. There's a lot of random in it. I don't mind random. I like some random and chance. Obviously, people who don't like that are not going to like this. If you didn't like Dark Castle, then you may enjoy this, because actually, I didn't like Dark Castle and I really enjoyed this. If you didn't like Dark Castle because of the randomness, maybe there's enough to eat on top. Have a look at it, certainly. If the aesthetic and the idea and the feel of it all attracts you, then certainly there's a solid, quite light, simple but fun game. It has a bit more rules overhead on top of it than Dark Castle did, but I think in a good way. If there's people, muggles in your world, or people don't play mini games, maybe Dark Castle's a good place to start off and move them up to Dark Sector. Just saying. I do like Themeborne Stone. I do like their aesthetics. I do like what they're aiming for and what they're trying to do. And all of that's cool. And they are definitely calling back to my childhood, my youth, my 80s growing up, and that aesthetic of those games and that sort of stuff. They're all hitting all those notes very finely. A lovely tune. So I very much look forward to what they've got coming next. Escape the Dark Sector, I'd give it a solid 8. There you go. I'm going to give it. We don't have to look for numbers in here, but I'm going to throw a random 8 in here just because. But no, Escape the Dark Sector for me comes recommended, especially if you're a fan of the aesthetic and the gameplay that's going on there and the art design. Then all that kind of is drawn you in. Then there's a solid, fun, light, quick, brutal experience here, which is all good by me. So that's it. That's Escape to the Dark Sector review from Themeborne Games. Cracking game. Go to their website, you better get stuff. Well, I didn't say, well, I'll add in, there's a soundtrack you can play along, which I've never seen on YouTube, but I did play with some reviews, and it's running at certain points on this review. It really adds to the aesthetic, especially in that solo play, having that kind of rolling honesty in the background. Had a real bit of fun to my playthroughs, so there's also an option on that. There you go. I look forward to what Themeborne have up their sleeve next. Solid game, really enjoyable, one that I will be keeping around and digging out, maybe get the kids to play, maybe. Thank you. I've been Mike B. This has been Who Dares Rolls. That was a review. My God, we got a review done. Excellent.